How could a man full of power and influence, who commanded respect not just from his congregation, but from the entire city, involved in this kind of mess with a choir mistress, the jewel of the congregation, that her voice could bring sinners to their knees, the voice that could melt the hardest hearts and yet chose infidelity over holiness? Join me as we dig deep into the story of this infidelity and murder mystery. Be rest assured that there are loads of lessons to be learned. Please let us know your thoughts on this story. Drop your comments below. Welcome to Infidelity HQ. I thank you, my viewers, most especially my subscribers, for your unwavering support as we keep improving and bringing daily told and untold true infidelity crime stories. Please don't forget to subscribe to this channel if you are yet to do so. Bishop Elijah Carter was a man of power and influence. With a silver tongue and a towering presence, he commanded respect not just from his congregation, but from the entire city of Atlanta. Holy Ark Ministries wasn't just a church, it was an empire, boasting thousands of members, a television ministry, and even a charity foundation. To the outside world, Bishop Carter was a beacon of morality. He was a man of power, grace, and deep conviction, or so the congregation of Holy Ark Ministries believed. In the heart of Atlanta, his megachurch stood as a beacon of hope, drawing thousands every Sunday. To his followers, he was a man of God, an untouchable figure who preached about righteousness and fidelity. But behind the pulpit, he was a man with secrets. Celeste Holloway, the choir mistress, was the jewel of the congregation. With a voice that could melt the hardest hearts, she was adored by many. Her voice could bring sinners to their knees, and her passion for gospel music was unmatched. She had been a part of Holy Ark Ministries for nearly a decade. She wasn't just the choir mistress, she was the heart of the worship team. She was also married to Deacon Henry Holloway, a devoted husband who believed in their sacred vows. Together they seemed like a model couple, respected and admired. She was seen as a devoted wife, her marriage the very image of what the church preached about love and commitment. But beneath the surface, things were not as they seemed. Henry, a hardworking man with a steady but modest job, had noticed the change in his wife. She was staying out later than usual, dedicating extra hours to rehearsals, claiming the church needed more from her. She was dressing differently, bolder, more elegant, as if trying to impress someone. He tried to ignore his suspicions, convincing himself that she was simply caught up in the ministry. Yet there were whispers. Members of the church noticed the way Celeste and Bishop Carter interacted. Prolonged glances, hushed conversations, a closeness that felt inappropriate. Rumors spread like wildfire, but no one dared question the bishop. Who would believe it? A man of God betraying not only his own wife, First Lady Angela Carter, but one of his most trusted ministers? Celeste, however, was caught in a storm of emotions. What started as innocent admiration had turned into something dangerous. Bishop Carter had a way with words, a way of making her feel seen, desired. He was powerful, charismatic, and knew how to manipulate her heart. It had begun with simple compliments, then late-night calls discussing church matters, then secret meetings in his private office. At first, she resisted, but the line between right and wrong blurred, and before she knew it, she was in too deep. One evening, as Celeste prepared for choir rehearsal, Henry stopped her at the door. "You've been spending a lot of time at the church," he said, his voice calm but firm. "I don't even see you anymore." Celeste forced a smile. "Henry, this is what I do. The choir needs me." He searched her face for the woman he married. I feel like something is changing, like you're slipping away." She hesitated for a second, but then placed a hand on his cheek. "Nothing is changing, baby. You're overthinking things." But deep inside, she knew he wasn't, because that night, she wasn't going to rehearsal. She was meeting Bishop Carter, and neither of them knew that someone was watching. Celeste's heart pounded as she drove through the quiet streets of Atlanta. She knew this was wrong. Every fiber of her being screamed at her to turn around, to go home to Henry. But the pull of Bishop Carter was stronger than guilt. She parked her car behind the church, where no one would see it, and slipped into the side entrance. The bishop was already waiting for her in his private study. Dimly lit and lined with bookshelves, it was a sanctuary within a sanctuary, a place where he counseled troubled souls. But tonight, it was where he entertained sin. "You took your time," he said, his deep voice laced with something dangerous, something thrilling. Celeste swallowed hard. I almost didn't come, he smirked. But you did. The tension between them was thick, the air charged with something unholy. She knew she had crossed a line she could never uncross, yet she stepped closer anyway. Meanwhile, back at home, Henry sat in their dimly lit living room, staring at the untouched dinner on the table. Celeste had sent him a text an hour ago. Late rehearsal. Don't wait up. But something didn't feel right. The last few months had been a whirlwind of changes. The woman who once prayed with him every night, who once laughed at his bad jokes, had become distant, guarded. And now she was coming home later and later, always with an excuse. Henry clenched his jaw. He wasn't a fool. He had ignored the rumors, dismissed the knowing looks some church members had given him, but now doubt gnawed at him like a parasite. Determined, he grabbed his keys and drove toward the church. Elsewhere, someone else was watching. In the shadows, a figure sat in a parked car just outside the church. Their fingers tapped impatiently against the dashboard as they watched Celeste's car disappear behind the building. Their eyes burned with rage, their mind racing with possibilities. This wasn't the first time they had followed her, and tonight they were done being silent. Inside the bishop's study, Celeste pulled away from his embrace, reality slamming into her. This has to stop. The bishop leaned against his desk, studying her. You say that every time. She shook her head. It's not right. Henry doesn't deserve you. His voice was smooth, persuasive. He doesn't see you the way I do. Tears welled in her eyes. But this isn't love. It's destruction. The bishop exhaled, stepping closer. Then why do you keep coming back? She had no answer. Outside, Henry parked his car across the street. He sat there, gripping the wheel, his heart pounding in his ears. He hadn't seen her car at first, but as he scanned the parking lot, he spotted it, tucked away where no one could see. And that's when the truth hit him like a freight train. His wife wasn't in rehearsal. She was here, alone, with the bishop. Henry's world tilted, his breath shallow. He reached for the door handle, ready to storm inside. But before he could move, his phone buzzed in his pocket, a message from an unknown number. You're not the only one watching. Henry's blood ran cold. He wasn't the only one who knew. Someone else was out there. And they weren't just watching, they were planning. The night air was thick with tension. Henry sat frozen in his car, staring at the message on his phone. You're not the only one watching. He looked around, his pulse hammering in his ears. The church parking lot was dimly lit, but in the distance, a dark vehicle was parked near the side entrance. The very entrance Celeste always used when she didn't want to be seen. Who else was watching? Inside the church, Celeste paced back and forth in the bishop's study, her nerves unraveling. I have to go, she said, grabbing her purse. The bishop reached for her wrist, his grip firm but not forceful. Celeste, listen to me. No, you listen, she snapped, pulling away. I love my husband. I've made a mistake, but I can still fix this. I just need to... A loud bang echoed through the church corridors. Both of them froze. What was that? Celeste whispered. The bishop's face darkened. Stay here. But she wasn't going to listen. Fear gripped her as she followed him out of the office, her breath shallow. The church was silent, eerily so. The sound had come from the back entrance. As they stepped into the hallway, the air smelled different, like gunpowder. The bishop turned the corner first, and then she heard his sharp inhale. Celeste followed his gaze and gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. Lying on the cold tile floor was a man. Blood pooled beneath him, spreading outward like ink soaking into paper. His face was turned slightly to the side, his lifeless eyes staring blankly ahead. It was Henry. Celeste's knees buckled, and a scream tore from her throat. She collapsed beside him, shaking him, willing him to move. No, 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 please! Somebody help! Footsteps pounded through the hallway. A janitor, an elderly man who cleaned the church at night, appeared at the end of the corridor. He took one look at the scene and ran back the way he came. Minutes later, sirens wailed in the distance. The bishop stood motionless, his expression unreadable. Celeste, he said quietly, his voice dangerously calm. She turned to him, eyes wild with terror. You! She shook her head, breath hitching. Did you do this? Before he could respond, the doors burst open and the police stormed in. Hands where we can see them! Celeste barely registered the officers swarming around them. Strong hands pulled her away from Henry's body. Someone was speaking, but their words were muffled. Her vision blurred. Then a voice cut through the noise. We need to bring them both in. She blinked, her pulse racing. Both. She turned her head and saw the bishop being handcuffed. The room spun. Had they just accused him of murder? Or was she about to be accused herself? The police station was cold, sterile, and suffocating. Celeste sat in the interrogation room, her hands trembling as she gripped a styrofoam cup of water. Across from her, Detective Jordan Wells studied her like a puzzle waiting to be solved. Mrs. Holloway, he began, his tone firm but not unkind. Tell me what happened tonight. Celeste swallowed hard. I don't know. 1 minute, I was with Bishop Carter in his office, and then we heard a gunshot. When we went to check, my husband was just lying there. Her voice cracked on the last words. Detective Wells leaned forward. You didn't see anyone else? She shook her head violently. It all happened so fast. Wells exchanged a glance with another officer standing near the door. Your husband received a text message right before he died. Celeste blinked. What? He placed a phone in front of her. A cracked screen, blood smudged along the edges. Henry's phone. She hesitated before looking at the last message. Come to the church if you want the truth. Tears welled in her eyes. He thought I was cheating. She turned to the detective, panic setting in. I didn't tell him to come. I didn't send that message. Wells watched her carefully. But someone did. The door opened and another officer walked in. Detective, Bishop Carter is ready to talk. Wells gave Celeste one last look. Stay put. We'll continue this later. She barely registered his words as her mind raced. Someone had set Henry up. Someone had lured him to his death. But who? Meanwhile, in another interrogation room, Bishop Elijah Carter sat across from Detective Melissa Raines, his expression unreadable. His hands were cuffed to the table, but he didn't seem fazed. Bishop Carter, Raines started, why was Henry Holloway at the church tonight? The bishop sighed. I don't know. You expect me to believe that? He leaned forward, his voice low. Detective, I am a man of God. I have no reason to kill anyone. Raines smirked. A man of God having an affair with a married woman doesn't exactly scream innocence. His jaw tightened. You have no proof of that. She slid a folder across the table. Inside were photos, grainy but clear enough to show Celeste and the bishop in compromising situations. Parking lots, hotel lobbies, the back of the church. He exhaled sharply. This isn't what it looks like. Oh? Raines leaned in. Because what it looks like is a man sneaking around with another man's wife, and now that man is dead. Carter's fingers curled into fists. I didn't kill Henry. Then who did? Silence. The detective closed the folder. You had motive. He found out about the affair. Maybe he confronted you. Maybe things got heated. I didn't do it. She stared at him. Then tell me this. Why did an unregistered gun with your fingerprints on it get found in the church dumpster? For the first time, fear flickered in the bishop's eyes. And Detective Raines knew. Whether he pulled the trigger or not, Bishop Carter was hiding something. Back in Celeste's interrogation room, a knock on the door made Celeste jump. Detective Wells re-entered, his face unreadable. Mrs. Holloway, we found something else. He placed another evidence bag on the table. Inside was a black hoodie and a pair of gloves, both stained with blood. She recoiled. What is that? It was found in the back of the church, tossed behind the choir stand. She shook her head frantically. That's not mine. We never said it was. Her blood ran cold. Wells sat down. We're testing the DNA, but let me ask you something, Mrs. Holloway. Who would want your husband dead? Celeste opened her mouth to answer but stopped. And that's when it hit her. There was only one person who had as much to lose as she did. The bishop's wife, First Lady Angela Carter. Celeste's body went cold. Angela Carter, the bishop's wife. How had she not seen it before? Detective, she whispered, her voice barely audible. You need to look at Angela Carter. Detective Wells leaned forward. And why is that? Celeste licked her dry lips. She knew. She had to have known about the affair. A woman like her, she wouldn't just sit back and let it happen. Wells exchanged a glance with the officer near the door. We'll look into it, he said vaguely. But before he could ask another question, a knock interrupted them. The officer opened the door and another detective entered, looking tense. You're gonna want to see this. Meanwhile, across the station, Bishop Elijah Carter was pacing inside his cell, his mind racing. He didn't kill Henry, but someone had gone through great lengths to make it look like he did. The gun, the text message, the planted evidence, it was too perfect. And there was only one person who had access to everything. His wife. Angela Carter had always been the picture of grace and dignity. The perfect first lady, standing beside him through every sermon, every scandal, every trial. But there was one thing about Angela that most people didn't know. She never forgot a betrayal, and she never forgave. Just then, the door burst open, and Detective Raines stormed in. Well, Bishop, it looks like you're not the only suspect anymore. She tossed a folder onto the table, and Elijah's stomach dropped. Inside were traffic camera photos, Angela's car, parked near the church at the exact time of the murder. His pulse quickened. Where is she? He asked quietly. The detective crossed her arms. That's what we'd like to know. Back at the Carter estate, Angela Carter sat in her dimly lit living room, a glass of red wine in her hand. The television played softly in the background, news coverage of her husband's arrest. The world was in shock. The great Bishop Elijah Carter, accused of murder. She took a slow sip, exhaling deeply. She had loved him once, truly deeply. She had built an empire beside him. But when she discovered his affair, something inside her snapped. He had humiliated her, made a fool of her, and she wasn't a woman who tolerated betrayal. Killing Henry had been easy. He was just a pawn in the bigger game. She had watched him suffer, bleeding out on the church floor, knowing that by the time they found him, her husband would be the prime suspect. But now the police were getting too close. Her phone buzzed. A single message from an unknown number. They know. Get out now. Angela clenched her jaw. She stood, grabbed her coat, and headed for the door. But as soon as she opened it, red and blue lights flooded her face. Angela Carter, a voice boomed. Put your hands where we can see them. She froze. And then, for the first time in years, Angela Carter did something she had never done before. She prayed. Epilogue. Justice and judgment. Angela Carter was arrested that night. The evidence against her was overwhelming. Traffic footage, her fingerprints on Henry's phone, and eventually the bloodied hoodie found behind the choir stand, which matched her DNA. Bishop Carter was released 2 days later, though his reputation was in ruins. His empire crumbled, his congregation scattered. He would never preach again. As for Celeste, she would carry the guilt of her choices forever. She had destroyed her marriage, lost the man who loved her, and nearly lost herself in the process. Standing over Henry's grave a month later, she whispered through tears, "I'm so sorry." And in the silence of the cemetery, for the first time in a long time, she felt truly alone.